Where did you get that bio? That bio is totally awesome, but not germane at all to what I'm about to discuss with you today. So nothing that he just introduced is relevant to what I'm going to talk about. But well, perhaps that's not true. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is time tracking. This is not a TED Talk, despite the fact that I run TEDx Cambridge. I put awesome people on stage, but I'm not a professional speaker or anything like that. I'm talking about time tracking, and one thing that is maybe relevant from my past, which is sort of why I do time tracking, is that I was a consultant at McKinsey, and I had a fantastic experience, but at some point felt like I was spending a lot of my time working for the man, so to speak, and that I started to feel anxiety that my time was not being spent in the way that I could most optimally use it. And so I became a bit of a fanatic. I'm here to speak with you about my obsession, if you will. So I keep track of how I spend my time. So I left consulting and I joined the startup community here in Boston. And the first thing that I did was I started to be really obsessive about keeping track of what I was doing, because it was so important to me to get diversity in my activities, to explore more, to spend more time socially, to do a wide variety of things, and to invest in my time in new ventures. And so keeping the structure, what I did, I left my structured, time-consuming job. I began life as a social entrepreneur. Startup life is, in fact, harder than consulting in some ways, and I want to get a lot more done. And I want to talk to you about a certain point after about 6 to 9 months of starting when I realized that I needed to get more, I needed to be more productive. And I was really struggling to figure out how I could be more productive. And there were really just two basic ways. One was I could either do more with my time spent working, and the second was I could try to get more time spent working. And so is one of those two options, and probably a combination of the two. And so I wanted to sort of baseline where I was spending my time. So how I did it, one of the nice things about tracking time is you have a nice historical record. So I actually know when I started doing this, it was Sunday, November 28th, in 2011. It's when I started tracking my time. And I went to 24-hour coverage in June. 24-hour coverage just means that I started tracking my sleep as well. So before June, there was, that's November 2010, and then June of 2011 is when I started doing sleep. Sleep just meant I was filling in the empty space when I wasn't, awake. I did it all in Google Calendar. I'll tell you why in a moment, and I export everything periodically to CSV where I do my analysis. Now, this is, in some ways, this is a reason I'm speaking with you is a sort of a redux on a very similar talk a couple months ago by our friend Oaze, who is a Harvard undergrad, am I right? Yes, and came to talk to us about doing analysis of time tracking. We started a conversation there that was at the QS meetup, and I wanted to sort of bring it back up and just kind of share how I look at my time and see if we could start the same conversation or similar conversation again. So first, why do I use Google Calendar? This is why I use Google Calendar. This is me putting in an entry into my calendar. I'm typing in the thing that I do. I'm picking the category. There it is. That takes less than 8 seconds. And then I can move it and drag it around. So typically I'll click, put it in, and then drag it around. That's why I use Google Calendar. It's relatively straightforward. And if I want to switch the category, I can. So I want to share with you that sort of practical tip on Google Calendar. And now let's talk about what the heck you can learn from such a crazy behavior. So it starts to look like this after a while. This is a little over 2 months of time tracking, all color-coded. You can see there's very little overlap. We'll get to that later. And what I first started to recognize as I categorize this all out is how little time I was actually spending on work. So what's important to note about this is there's a waterfall chart. This is the time that I'm spending, and it adds up to 100%. I'm fudging it a little bit. There is some time that's untracked. But what you may or may not be able to see on this chart is that in this quarter, 11% of my hours were spent on what I would call work. That is 11% of total hours, not 11% of waking hours. I spent 33% of my time that quarter sleeping. I spent 9% of my time, almost as much as I spent working, spent 9% of my time eating and or cooking. So I was surprised at how much time that took. So the first thing here is I thought, you know what, actually if I want to be more productive, I probably could spend more time working if only I could figure out where I would get that time from. And the first kind of guttural moment after having done this analysis is I have to pick something that I'm not going to do in order to do the thing that I want to do. And that was kind of a challenge initially. Like, what am I not going to spend time on? So I picked personal time. Q4, I reduced the personal time. I'm going to flip back and forth a little bit so you can kind of see what changed. It turns out I actually slept a little bit more that quarter, but spent significantly less time doing personal stuff. And obviously that translated at least partially into work, and it also translated into volunteering. I'm going to zoom forward a year. Q3 of 2012. I now spend even more time sleeping and a lot more time doing work. I've changed my volunteering activities. My venture is a social venture, so I decided I would only volunteer for myself. And that's now Q3. Q4 2012 was very similar to Q3. So this is an important change for me that was only enabled kind of through the intentionality that came from having information about how I spent my time. I want to share a couple of other quick things about time tracking, and then I'm going to go straight to Q&A in case you guys have any questions or want to talk about time tracking as a group. A couple principles in how I do time tracking or how I improve my data is I will forget things after 48 hours. There are several days, there's actually a week of this past year where I don't have an accurate record, and that's because I didn't do it within 48 hours. So I do recommend you get into a little bit of a habit if you try this. The second is I don't record anything that's less than 10 minutes in duration. It's just not worth it. As a result, you do get half-hour blocks in the day that are kind of empty, or you get other little breakages. You can double book the future, but you cannot double book the past unless you actually did two things at once. And that is incredibly rare. I would actually be surprised if you could routinely actually do two things at once. When I'm multitasking an hour, I will, if I'm really doing two things during that hour, I'll just make them 2 half-hour blocks in the history. So the historical record is pretty accurate and very little double booking. I have one calendar that is just for the locations or context things that are not what I'm doing but where I am, and that gets excluded from my analysis to prevent double booking. You don't want to double count your time because there is in fact only 1 second at a time. It's also helpful if you get your spouse to do this with you, and this happened a year in. I've been doing this now for 2 years, so it's happened a year in. My wife started doing it as well, and that was surprisingly helpful because she remembered things that we were doing that helped me to sort of bound my time. She also bought into the crazy behavior. So again, multiple calendars. I have about a dozen of these. This is a snapshot of the kinds of things we have here. Career Village is my venture. I have exercise. OpNet is a volunteer opportunity. What I called professional. Skills and discovery was this meeting is going into my calendar as skills and discovery, and there are a bunch of other things like that. In order to spend less time tracking time, this is now my new behavior. This is 2 weeks from now. I have nothing scheduled for 2 weeks from now, but except all this stuff is pre-scheduled. These are recurring events. I, in fact, do sleep about 8 hours a night, so I just have every night it's 8 hours, and I move it. You saw how easy it was to move things in Google. I have exercise in there. There's no way I get to an hour a day every day, but that's what I'd like to be, and so on. So there's other things in there that are recurring events. This basically gives me some nice bounds. This may feel incredibly structured for some of you. You may feel like this is ridiculous, but this is helpful for me to spend less time putting in the events. As a result, you won't see data entry in my calendar because it never takes more than 10 minutes, so it never meets the threshold. Another thing that was an insight for me very early on was, and I referenced this actually a couple months ago, was how the extent to which you learn through the process of tracking time, you learn how bad you are, or I learned how bad I was at estimating how long things take. So one experiment I did was to snapshot a week. This is my expectation for what I would do during a certain week on Sunday, and I'm going to show you, I'm going to flip back and forth to what actually happened. So I want you to ignore the 2 right columns. Those are the weekend. I did not project what the weekend would be, so ignore those 2. But Friday has this giant green thing in it. That was a full day conference. Look at Monday through Thursday, where the red stuff, the orange stuff, is productive time. And what you may be able to tell is that the productive time shrank. That other things crept into my productive time, and that is actually pretty routine. It's very routine for me that I'm projecting a certain amount of time spent working, and that in reality that time shrinks because other things get in the way. The last kind of comment, I sort of referenced it a little bit, is that there's a lot of value in the process of setting this up. So even the activity of taking a to-do list and trying to actually block it into time was eye-opening for me the first time when I realized that I couldn't get even half the things done that I would normally have set as aspirations for myself, which explains why every Friday I feel like I need to work on Saturday. I'm going to stop there. Anybody have questions or thoughts about time tracking? Yes, sir.
Thank you. Question on the sort of work time spent. So I think initially you were at 11%.
Yes.
And then I think it moved up to 18%.
Yeah.
Did you look at sort of what types of activities you were doing that additional time and cover up that they actually work?
Yeah, so two parts to the question. The first part is, do I look at look deeper than the category level? And the answer is absolutely yes. So when I do the analysis, I double click in, I basically sort through all the descriptions, and I can tell pretty quickly the kinds of things I'm spending time on. That's a little bit harder to show here, so I didn't show that to you guys. The second part of your question is, do I assess productivity? And the answer there is kind of no. It's very qualitative. I'm setting weekly goals for myself. I mean, I'm assessing that qualitatively. So unfortunately, no. This gets to the first point. It's like, using my time better, or should I spend more time working? You could argue that I should actually spend less time working and do a better job, and then you get to the 4-hour work week.
For a very detailed and comprehensive presentation, but I'd love to hear your comments on how you see it going forward. So clearly there was a component of learning about this and learning where you were not as productive as you might want to be. Do you see as much value going forward, or have you extracted most of the value from this exercise?
Frankly, I do believe I have extracted the majority of the value from this exercise. It has now become more of a habit, perhaps obsession really is the appropriate word. And part of this gets to Awei's presentation from a couple months ago where we were discussing the difficulty of the analysis. I find a lot of value in the process of it. It happens to help me, it provides structure that I greatly enjoy. But the analysis does take a while. It took me an hour and a half to put this presentation together, and that's quite expensive. So until our friend over here from Harvard resolves the analysis issue and makes it automated, I will continue to do the analysis very infrequently, and I will continue to track my time on an hourly basis. Okay, what's the update? Are you doing it?
I'm still working on it. But what I was going to say is, I think where it could be useful is when you have lots of people doing it. So if I could compare my week to the average Harvard student or the average MIT student or the average Caltech student, I think that would be really cool. So I mean, that's one area.
But to follow on that, once you get the average and see how you compare, is there diminishing returns? An example is I can measure the electricity usage in my house, and they now have given me my neighbor's electricity usage so I can compare it. But once I extract that once, or maybe figure out that my air conditioner runs 7 hours and everybody else runs 5 hours and I should do something about it, I've extracted most of the value, or I feel I've extracted most of the value out of it.
Yeah, I just to sort of reiterate, I do think it's possible that I've extracted most of the value from this exercise. I actually think it was very valuable initially, and it was very valuable 6 months in and 12 months in, and every month I continue to do this, it's probably slightly less valuable than the previous month because I've optimized, presumably.
Well, quick follow-up comment too about just what you were saying about it's still valuable. It also seems like it keeps you honest. But then, just by doing it, it helps you not fall off the track. But then my question is, are you doing anything also to track or think about emotions? Like if you're working more, are you trading that by being more stressed, or are you happier because you feel you're getting more done?
Yeah. Yeah, so I'd be interested in I think others are probably more sophisticated with emotion tracking than I am. I keep a journal, and I am very intentional about my emotional state and my level of happiness. Really, is what I'm trying to assess. But I don't think I am the expert in the room. I'm sure many people in the room are better at tracking happiness than I am. So I haven't gathered that data in such a manner that I can correlate it directly with this information.
But you're at least pleased with how it's going, right? You're not like, well, I'm totally stressed out all the time.
Yeah, and frankly, part of it is perhaps my memory is abnormally bad, but on a Friday I decide to write in my journal about how I'm feeling this week and how it went. And frankly, sometimes I can't remember what I did on Tuesday and actually where I actually did spend my time. So having the record has been helpful for that reflection. What did I do this week? And I remember, oh yes, I actually did that thing, and that did contribute to my great pleasure or anxiety or what have you. Toward the end of the week, for example.
Will your system work on calendars and different Gmail accounts?
It's a bit crummy for that, actually. So I try to consolidate all of my calendars into one account ultimately. So I do that duplication exercise. So if you use Google Calendar, I either always invite myself if it's from another calendar, which solves my problem, or I dupe it. Which is the copy to X function. And I try to sort of train, if you will, everybody in my circles to invite the right account. So I say, email me here for whatever you need, but if you're going to send me an invite, send it to Jared Chung at Curve, or whatever the appropriate account is.
Last question.
Okay, last question.
So have you tried varying the granularity of your activities? Like, if you say just in this block I'm working, have you tried saying I was in a meeting for this much and I was working actively on my project for this much?
Sorry, could you say that one more time? Have I tracked the...
Different granularity of the activities you're doing.
Yeah, so it's really granular actually, and it's in fact so granular I would need like semantic analysis to really categorize it all properly. So it's manual input, and you saw that basically my priority is to make sure that there is a record over optimizing the subcategories all the time. So I have the category, then I have a couple of things that don't change, like sleep is always called sleep, travel is always called travel, with some rare exceptions. Everything else I have to do some sort of semantic parsing in order to figure out exactly how the subcategory works. Thank you all very much. I apologize for the rapid speaking, but after all, I am the time tracking guy. So I hope you all have a great time trying this out, and I do recommend Google Calendar for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Jared.